5. Restore the black family. Why sisters cannot find a good man. There is a lot to be said about this concept, so I will try to address it from as many angles as I can. There's been a lot of talk about why black women can't find a good black man. First, I would like to start out by saying that there are plenty of good black men out there who are responsible and doing the right thing. However, for some of the reasons that I've already addressed previously in this book, we still have some issues between us. The main reason for the problems that truly exist in this area are due to a lack of black fathers in the home. I think many problems within the family can be traced back to this. Young men grow up without good examples of how to be a man and how to treat a woman, and young women grow up without the love from a father, so they find themselves in strange situations with other men simply because they are looking for the male love that they never had. The frustration in this has led black women to lose faith in the black man. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, girl, you know you can't depend on a man, a phrase that I seldom hear among other cultures.
By killing of the protective male image, and by creating a submissive dependent mind of the nigger male slave, we have created an orbiting cycle that turns on its own axis forever.
Excerpt from the Willie Lynch letter. The lack of black fathers can be attributed to the war on drugs, high incarceration rates, and a culture that is somewhat anti family and pro promiscuity and promotes baby mamas and baby daddies as somewhat of a cool norm. A two-parent home in the black community is almost a luxury at this point. Men, in general, are wired to protect and provide, and women, in general, are designed to love and nurture. Since many of us come from tough environments, the natural instinct of a woman is to seek someone who can protect and provide for them according to the standards of what is needed in that environment. With the natural instinct of a man to protect and provide, I believe that what has largely led to the fascination with the thug and drug culture for both young black males and young black females is based on the environment in which he or she lives. We've all heard the claims that black women, typically younger black women under age 25, are more attracted to thugs and doughboys. I think there is some truth to this, but more so among the younger females. During their younger years, women tend to be attracted to the more thuggish type or the doughboy type, which they most instinctively feel could protect and provide for them. However, the young males who went to class on time and didn't have an urban style of dress are usually the ones looked at as less attractive and desirable at that age. As they get older, these are the ones that grow up to start major companies or get good corporate jobs. As females grow older, stability becomes more attractive. But since these males were usually skipped over at a younger age, they have already been married off to someone else, or dare I say, engaged in an interracial relationship. Unfortunately, though, many black men tend to be swallowed up in the street life, either through incarceration or from being mentally imprisoned with a street mentality for the rest of their lives, both of which are unattractive to an older, more mature black woman.
He cannot get past her early slave molding process. He is a good tool, now ready to be tied to the horse at a tender age. By the time a nigger boy reaches the age of 16, he is soundly broken and ready for a long life of sound and efficient work and the reproduction of a unit of good labor force.
Excerpt from the Willie Lynch letter. With many young girls and women coming from single parent, fatherless homes, having trouble finding what they deem as a good man, and possibly being single mothers who have a child with someone who isn't providing, has caused many of them to lose faith in the black man. Once this happens, it perpetuates the idea that men are no good, which is taught to the next generation of daughters. This shapes women's views of African American men from an early age and affects all their future relationships with men. For women, this is now a self-fulfilling prophecy and perpetual process. With fear that their sons may grow up like the father, many black women tend to over-nurture their sons in order to keep them close and train them to be the men they want them to be or never had. Child support eventually becomes a major legal issue, which feeds the courts, the attorneys, and the private jails that all have a vested interest in you having these problems.
For fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak and dependent, but physically strong. Because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offsprings to be psychologically independent. What have you got? You've got the nigger woman out front and the nigger man behind and scared. This is a perfect situation of sound sleep and good economics.
Excerpt from the Willie Lynch letter. This is not a stab at black men or another one of those black men need to do better arguments. I personally don't think that helps either. While I believe in personal responsibility, black men are not entirely to blame for these circumstances. Many of them are doing the best they can with what they have and playing the hand they've been dealt. Black men are faced with many obstacles, including a lack of fatherly examples, a lack of economic opportunity, and indoctrination from business, religious, and political institutions that do not necessarily have the best interest of black males in mind. Institutionalized fatherhood. We tend to talk a lot about problems that stem from absent fathers. We typically fail to offer a solution to the problem. One solution I see to the lack of fathers in the homes is the idea of institutionalizing fatherhood. I use the term institutionalize lightly. I don't mean government institutions, but private institutions that can educate, train, and provide life skills to large numbers of black males at one time. This will contribute in more ways than one could do in his family alone. We need educated, socially and morally conscious black men who can mentor younger generations of black men on a one-to-many basis. This should include women's organizations that can mentor enough young women to become responsible mothers, and then we can create a balance between the two groups that will eventually provide stability for the African American family structure. These organizations or institutions must be privately owned and not government owned, as that would only open up another lane for more propaganda and negative indoctrination. We can't talk about restoring the black family without talking about the abortion issue in our community. It was once said that the most dangerous place for a black baby is in their mother's stomach. According to data collected by the Center for Disease Control, abortion kills more black people than 7 leading diseases combined. When looking at the concept of abortion, we must first look at the institutions at the heart of most abortions, such as Planned Parenthood. Then we must look at the founders of these institutions, such as Margaret Sanger, founder of the National Birth Control League, later known as Planned Parenthood, and examine the motives of such individuals and the institutions that permeate our community, always taking into account personal responsibility and accountability. On the next page, I have included excerpts from various speeches and interviews given by Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood.
Margaret Sanger speech. We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is the man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members. Our failure to segregate morons, who are increasing and multiplying, demonstrates our foolhardy and extravagant sentimentalism. Philanthropist encourages the healthier and more normal sections of the world to shoulder the burden of unthinking and indiscriminate fecundity of others, which brings with it, as I think the reader must agree, dead weight of human waste. Instead of decreasing and aiming to eliminate the stocks that are most detrimental to the future of the race and the world, it tends to render them to a menacing degree dominant. We are paying for and even submitting to the dictates of an ever-increasing, unceasingly spawning class of human beings who never should have been born at all. Today, eugenics is suggested by the most diverse minds, as the most adequate and thorough avenue to the solution of racial, political, and social problems. I think you must agree that the campaign for birth control is not merely of eugenic value, but is practically identical with the final aims of eugenics. Birth control propaganda is thus the entering wedge for the eugenic educator. As an advocate of birth control, I wish to point out that the unbalance between the birth rate of the unfit and the fit, admittedly, the greatest present menace to civilization, can never be rectified by the inauguration of a cradle competition between these two classes. In this matter, the example of the inferior classes, the fertility of the feeble-minded, the mentally defective, the poverty-stricken classes, should not be held up for emulation. On the contrary, the most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the overfertility of the mentally and physically defective. Give dysgenic groups, people with bad genes, in our population their choice of segregation or compulsory sterilization. The third group of society are those irresponsible and reckless ones having little regard for the consequences of their acts, or whose religious scruples prevent their exercising control over their numbers. Many of this group are diseased, feeble-minded, and are of the pauper element dependent upon the normal and fit members of society for their support. There is no doubt in the minds of all thinking people that the procreation of this group should be stopped. In passing, we should here recognize the difficulties presented by the idea of fit and unfit. Who is to decide this question? The grosser, the more obvious. The undeniably feeble-minded should, indeed, not only be discouraged, but prevented from propagating their kind. But among the writings of the representative eugenist, one cannot ignore the distinct middle-class bias that prevails. There is only one reply to a request for higher birth rate among the intelligent, and that is to ask the government to first take the burden of the insane and feeble-minded from your back. Mandatory sterilization for these is the answer. Slavs, Latin, and Hebrew immigrants are human weeds, a deadweight of human waste. Blacks, soldiers, and Jews are a menace to the race. Eugenic sterilization is an urgent need. We must prevent multiplication of this bad stock. Our objective is unlimited sexual gratification without the burden of unwanted children. Women must have the right to live, to love, to be lazy, to be an unmarried mother, to create, to destroy. The marriage bed is the most degenerative influence in the social order. The most merciful thing that a family does to one of its infant members is to kill it. Margaret Sanger, the founder of the American Birth Control League, later known as Planned Parenthood.
Promote safe sex rather than no sex. Growing up in a religious society, many of us were taught that sex is something that should be done after marriage. However, we all know that people are going to have sex. Because of that, I'm not going to try to convince you or your youth that you shouldn't have sex at all. It's just not going to happen. There's a difference in the way things should be versus the way things really are. And it is always better to start with the way things really are, regardless of where your moral compass is set. While preaching an abstinence concept is a responsible thing to do and may fit inside of church walls, the harsh reality is that people have always had the desire to have sex and will continue to have this desire, especially in today's open society. When preaching against sex, you are asking people to go against something they want to do naturally. This concept simply isn't convincing and may have a rebellious and often adverse effect instead. Propaganda has promoted abortion as a reactive solution rather than contraception as a preventative measure to stop unwanted pregnancy from happening in the first place. As I mentioned earlier, today's youth are influenced by what they see and hear in the media, and unfortunately, premarital sex is amongst these influences. Because of this, promoting safe sex rather than no sex can potentially contribute to the reduction of African American babies born out of wedlock and into broken families, which only repeats the family destruction process. While casual sex will never go away, promoting safe sex can stop or at least reduce the spread of disease. This gives young Black men and women time to mature mentally, spiritually, and economically so that when they do start a family, it will be one that enhances the African American community rather than contribute to the destruction of it. Start your own family holiday. Every year, we celebrate and recognize all sorts of holidays. Some religious, like Christmas, some just because, like Groundhog's Day. Holidays are set aside as specified times to recognize certain causes or beliefs, and we are typically given off as a way to observe those holidays. Why not start your own holiday? It doesn't have to be one that is nationally recognized, but one day every year that your family comes together could be a great way to celebrate your family as a whole. This will give you the opportunities to not only celebrate your family, but to teach the younger generation of your family about your family history and genealogy. Not only will this new holiday give you the opportunity to discuss your family history, but it will also give you the opportunity to discuss your African American history, where we've come from, what we had to go through, and all the great accomplishments that we've had as a people. Take that opportunity to also explain the challenges, advantages, and disadvantages that they may face as they move forward in life. If you do this, imagine how strong your family unit would be. If each of us did this, imagine how strong the African American family unit as a whole would be. Now, this does not have to be corny. Remember to make it fun, cool, and interesting so that it appeals to all age levels of your family. This is very much like the family reunion concept, but when you brand it as a family holiday, it makes it less like a family get together and more like a family celebration of something significant. This helps to restore a sense of pride within your family unit. The Restore Black Family Action Plan, Community Action Plan. Step 1, promote safe sex. Because of the number of births out of wedlock, it is apparent that most individuals do not think about using protection. Raise the standard to make safe sex the norm. We must work to reduce the amount of out of wedlock births, fatherless homes, which has a rippling effect, disease, and unnecessary abortions. Step 2, build actual male training schools and mentorship programs all over the country that will allow a one-to-many teaching environment until we can catch up to the rate of fatherless homes. Step 3, adopt a generational wealth concept of creating and preserving family wealth that will sustain at least 3 generations. Personal action plan. Step 1, make the pledge to yourself that if you're going to have sex, you will at least use protection. This is not meant to be corny. Think about this. Why have a kid with someone you're not married to or may not want to be with forever? Why risk getting a disease and dying for a brief pleasure? Just remember, the same thing that gives you life can also take it away. Just wrap it up. Step 2, become economically empowered and financially free so that you can afford to raise a family in a decent area. You can have the time it takes to raise them rather than letting society do the raising for you, i.e., daycare, the public school system, the television, or the streets. When you begin to create and think about wealth, you will begin to talk wealth, which is a way of planting wealthy seeds in your child. Step 3, lay out a written wealth creation and preservation plan for your family lineage. You should plan for at least 3 generations deep. Every generation must aid in pushing the family empire forward. Refer to the Rockefeller or Kennedy family lineage as an example. Step 4, record your family history in some sort of written document, such as a book or a binder that can be passed down from generation to generation. A 3-ring binder will probably work best since you can easily add new pages to it. Teach your family history at home to evoke a sense of family pride. Turn your family name into a brand. Think of the last names Forbes or Dell as an example.